Welcome to the Drivers Republic podcast, brought to you in association with Dundee Motors, where more Irish drivers find their next car from a trusted dealership than anywhere else. Why? Because Dundeal's trusted dealership program means verified dealerships and the kind of backup that matters, like warranties and history checks, giving you confidence from your very first click. And welcome back to the Drivers Republic podcast, and thank you, Dundee, for your continued support. Yeah. Anyway, how are you, Paddy?
Well, sure, I'm grand. We're sitting here cosy in a Renault 5 EV.
It is quite cosy. I do wonder, do we look like two Gardaí, except
on a stakeout. Yeah,
we wouldn't
exactly.
have huge microphones in front of us. Did you see him there, Mikey, did you?
Yeah, well, we've just been interviewing the boss of Ford UK and Ireland, Lisa Brankin, and you'll listen to that in the next few minutes.
But hang around long enough, you'll hear her.
Yeah, she was a very interesting an interesting interview and tells us an awful lot about their plans for Ireland and also a new initiative they have about getting more people into EVs. And as we sit here in a very, very green St. Patrick's Day green Renault 5 EV, Mark, you've been in this car. I just love it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, my one was yellow. I specifically asked them for a yellow one. I am a diva like that sometimes.
But look, they could have got this car so wrong. They could have been a bad caricature of itself. It could have been too big, too heavy, too lumpy. But it's they've nailed it. They've absolutely nailed it.
They have. I mean, just everything. Just the way people look at it. Whoa, is that a Renault logo when it starts up? Oh, that's very nice. Just the retro bits. They've done enough nodding to the original. I like how it drives. I haven't driven the 120 brake horsepower version with the smaller battery.
No, and I don't imagine that many people will either, because I think, in a world of PCP, people are going to come in and go, okay, how much is it per month? Give us the nice one.
But I'd like to try it from two perspectives. One, it's a little bit lighter. I think it's over 100 kilos lighter again. And I find, particularly in the wet, it can actually be a little bit hard to get traction in this car accelerating away. And I wonder, does the 120 actually make it the more drivable car?
Also, have you been on the configurator?
On the website?
Yeah.
No.
Because there is a steel wheel option at the entry point, and it looks really good.
You have a weird quirk for these weird things on cars.
I do, yeah. No. Steel wheels.
And I get hubcaps.
I love a basic Dacia Duster.
Yeah.
Especially the previous generation one. But
I know, but
no, it's one of those specs absolutely no one will probably ever see, but it is it's available in theory if you want one, but no, most people will go garish colours, I hope, and all the bells and whistles, which they should as well.
The other thing is that I have also sat in this car, and it's not this car, it's a Nissan Micra. I'm here in Barcelona at the brand new Nissan Micra with Bert de Haas, who is one of the designers who's worked across the project. Welcome to the podcast, first of all.
Welcome. Well, thank you for welcoming me, yes.
I love how you don't even know what you're being welcomed to, but
Yes.
Trust me, it's okay. So, look, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, this is on the Umpire platform, the Renault-Nissan Alliance. So there is going to be, I'm sure you've been asked this question a lot. There is this car called the Renault 5. It has made it, in a good way, a really big impact in the world. So how difficult has it been to put your twist on that car?
Difficult and not that difficult. I think as a designer, you expect to have constraints, and that's the job of a designer, working about, around constraints and making constraints a strength. And I think that's what we have done. So the good things of the platform, so the nice stands and the kind of sporty feel, we used, and on that we have given really a micro expression. So with the very iconic, timeless qualities that we looked at of the previous Micras, and that made Micras kind of loved through some of the generations before. So we were looking mostly at, excuse me, K12 Micra, third generation. If you look at this car, it still feels very modern, very, surprisingly, actually, after all these years, very iconic. So the designers really wanted to take some of these elements, but with the platform we were given, we also could make sure that not only we have this iconic, timeless elements, but we also have a very sporty kind of confident look. Yeah,
It's probably fair to say, because of the platform it's on,
yeah.
for example, this Micra has bucket seats. I don't know if a Nissan Micra ever had bucket seats in the past. So it's probably now going to be one of the better Micras to drive. So that's one of the
Yeah,
benefits.
yeah. This is yeah. I think this it fits. I mean, the image is correct. I think all what it shows now more sporty stands and more like a kind of this chunky look, but also like like you say, the interior seats are sporty. I think everything is correct. Everything is. It's very important for us to make a car that is kind of honest. That when you see the design, it does what it says it should do. So, and I think this is something we achieved.
So I know people can't see, but we'll just walk towards the front of the car. So this is probably the part that really does capture the Micra. I think when you
Yeah,
look at it, even if you glance in traffic with the round headlights, you'd go, that's you maybe not Micra straight away, but you'd know it's a Nissan.
yeah,
Just talk us through the front and how it's
yeah.
different.
Well, thank you, and nice to hear that that's what we intended to do. So yeah, the first thing you would notice is the signature headlights. So these oval shapes that are very much stretched from the front to the top of the vehicle. So very define the 3D kind of corners of the car. And when you see a headlight like this with this shape, it gives a bit of a cute feeling. Like it makes you smile when you see the car.
Yeah, it's friendly looking. Yeah.
It has that friendly feel, which is again appropriate for an EV. The idea is, it's easy to use. Again, the kind of the honesty about it. On the other hand, the sporty image, you have the horizontal kind of functional part of the headlight. It's this kind of more sporty horizontal look. So you have these two elements that are contrasting each other. And we have a start-up sequence actually that shows these both elements. We have this kind of more robotic in the horizontal part, like a light that goes from left to right. It's almost like a silent kind of light that appears.
Yep.
And then we have the wink kind of oval that it's a car winking at you. So yeah, you have this high-tech element with the kind of friendly element.
And above and below the headlight. So a lot of cars will do above the headlight, but this obviously has two aspects to it. Can you talk about your gelato scoop? For people going, what is a gelato scoop on a car?
Yeah, the gelato scoop is, if you imagine, take a gelato spoon and you kind of scoop the ice cream out. So with almost that precise section, we created this ridge on the side of the vehicle. And so what it does is recreating a little bit also what you see on the third generation Micra, but instead of a ledge kind of a shoulder, if you like.
It's along the shoulder line.
Yes, it's along the shoulder line, and it connects the lamp, so the headlight graphic, with the rear. But rather than going all the way connecting to the rear, it stops kind of somewhere almost at the end of the rear door, and you feel that kind of scoop effect. But visually, of course, it connects with the rear graphic. There is an element in the rear graphic of the rear light that connects this line up. And what it makes as well, when you step back, there is a real simplicity to its construction. You have the wheel arch graphics, quite voluptuous wheel arches, and then this line on top of it. It's not really shoulder, but it has that structure, rigidity that connects the front with the rear. So yeah, it makes this very simple graphic almost. When you see a car and you ask someone after 5 minutes, can you draw that car without looking at it?
Yes.
You could recreate it, and I think that's quite nice. That makes for an iconic design if you can do this.
Where is the strangest place you've had to draw early sketches of a car?
The strangest place.
Yes.
Where I had to
Like
draw.
not in the studio, but like, I don't know. It's like if you're a musician. Musicians sometimes say these lyrics came to me and I woke up at 3 a.m. and I wrote them there and then. Have you ever, I don't know, woken up from a bad dream and but there was a good bit where there was a car in it?
Well, sometimes you are thinking so much about design that actually, you can dream about it, and you you maybe wake up and you thought, oh, that was something there, like that was so cool, I was really into it. But then maybe when you try to recreate that, it's maybe not what you thought about it, or maybe trying to do design after a few pints or something. That might be sometimes you think that's a good idea, but maybe the day after when you really look at your sketches is maybe
Yeah.
sometimes it works, sometimes not.
What are your thoughts as a car designer on the last few years of SUV after SUV? Do you think now we're going to see maybe for the next few years smaller cars or?
Yeah, I think the future like of mobility and all this, I think we will see something for every customer. There will be a lot of different things. I think companies will have to make the decisions what they want to express, what they want to do, and there will be different things, for different people, for different customers. So a lot of customers like the SUV because just you sit higher, it's protective. That certainly maybe women like to kind of sit higher and look around. Of course, some people like the agility or like just lightweight, like low car, the aero benefits, whatnot. So yeah, I think the market will provide different solutions. It needs to be commercial, viable, and then in the end,
Yeah.
yes.
You sound like a car designer, but also a realistic car designer. So it's
Yeah.
like
After yeah,
you have your dreams and then you have what's
I've
real.
been in car design a long time, but it's still, I say these things make also make design interesting. If it was just about shapes, and yeah, I think you would get maybe tired of it. It's everything, It's yeah, creating a product that people can use and offer good value and can fall in love with. There's still, of course, the emotional value.
Yes.
That's what is design about. It's a bit, psychology involved there.
Yeah.
What makes people fall in love with a car, and a lot of stuff is subconscious. So yeah, these are all fascinating things to consider.
I'm glad you mentioned that because there are a lot of cars over the last decade, maybe that it could be a Kia, it could be a Volkswagen. A lot of cars tend to kind of look a little bit samey. So this is definitely a personality-based car.
Yeah.
With 40 years of Micra as heritage,
Yeah.
the customer, a typical Micra customer, I don't know. It could be a young person, it could be a retired person. It's a car that is a lot of things to a lot of different people.
That's yeah.
So what was the brief when you were designing it from Nissan?
I mean, that's how I feel as well. But I think it's just like how it in the beginning of the project, this came to life very organic, I would say, very natural. So because we had the Ampere platform that we could have a look at, and could we use this? So, and when we came out very quickly with this kind of very emotional design, and everything, the project came to life very organically, I would say. So we want to make this, I think, funky car, that isn't bringing the Micra into the EV era. So and like I said, we were very inspired by some of the elements of previous Micras, mostly the third generation, the K12. Which
I'm sensing that was your favorite Micra.
well, yes, but it seems to be, it's interesting talking with some journalists from different countries. It seems to also mean something different in different countries. Like in Italy, there was also much loved because it's a bit
well,
like
in Ireland, it was a lot of people's first car because of low insurance.
Yeah.
A small car. So it was a lot of people had it as their first
yeah,
and maybe second car.
But it's when you see it now, it's still around on the road, and you look at it, exterior and interior. Actually, you can really appreciate some of the design qualities. That it was actually quite timeless and iconic, and some simplicity to it. So which we want to take the good things of that car, but I think also with that platform here, we managed to also give it that oomph, a little bit, the sporty stance and etc.
Do you think, not just on this car, but as a car designer of any car, when, as you say, you look back at a car maybe 20 years old and it hasn't aged, is that where you go, yes, I got that one right?
I think so. I like this kind of it's like when you listen to music, some some music maybe you think, oh, that's catchy and stuff, and then like after a few times listening, you're tired of it.
Yes.
And some in the beginning, that's a difficulty about doing this design in the beginning. maybe music that actually you will appreciate most. It takes really time to get into, and then maybe after a while you can always get back to it, and actually it maybe even gets better, with time. And that's what you strive for, I think, as a designer, yes.
So over the next few years, Nissan will release 4 new EVs, including a new version of the Leaf. Will you be working on any of those projects, and can you tell us, or is it all secret?
Yeah, so we will be launching, Leaf, as you know, and we will have a new Juke, and so there's a lot of projects coming, but they are already, designed. Basically, design is always a few years ahead.
So the stuff we haven't seen yet, you can't tell us.
No, yeah, that's like yes, that's the generation after that. So yes.
Do you feel, actually, one last question, do you feel like other brands that maybe haven't got into this space yet, in this kind of new era of cars, are watching now the Micra, the Renault 5, the Volkswagen ID2? Are they looking at those spaces, do you think, thinking, let's see how that goes? Or would it inspire them to also start making smaller cars again?
Yeah, I think the market is probably, wanted to do that kind of, more A segment, B segment, kind of entry level of electric vehicles. It's kind of tricky to guess the right time for EVs, for sure. And when we say, we always, give the customer what they want, and so we are kind of. But it's very difficult to play right at that time. We know that the market is adapting, and more and more EVs are sold. So, and of course the network for charging is getting there, and so it will become more and more standard. So I think with this also, you will see more cars into the market, that are
in that smaller segment.
In that smaller segment as well.
Well, we'll watch this space. Thank you very much for talking to us, and good luck with the car.
Thank you.
That was in the last couple of weeks, or last week?
About 2 weeks ago, I went to...
So is it this car reshelled?
Yes.
Reskinned?
Yes.
And...
Not the first time. So Nissan had an alliance with Renault quite a few years ago with the Kadjar. It was a Qashqai underneath.
Yeah.
This happens a lot. Volkswagen and Ford do it. There's other brands. I mean, it's not quite the same, but Hyundai and Kia are the same company. Who knew?
Badge engineering.
So, the Micra, I think, actually is probably going to be the most exciting Nissan Micra that's ever been made. It's around over 40 years, and I don't need to tell you, but you probably maybe did some driving lessons in a Micra, but
your granny had one.
Yeah, it's potentially an older. Now, look, some younger people obviously did drive it because it was cheaper to insure and all that stuff, but now it's probably it has bucket seats because it has lots of leftovers from this car. Obviously, it doesn't have numbers in the seats, and some of the interior doesn't have quite the retro feel of the Renault 5, but in many other ways the interior, apart from the badge and the steering wheel, is identical.
Is this an European only model, or is it also on sale worldwide?
European only, from what I can tell.
Okay.
Because one, I don't know if they've ever had a Micra in America. It's probably too small. Australia,
Japanese market, I was thinking. That was the Nissan March for a while there, but I don't know.
Well, they do have Mount Fuji on the left pillar for the boot, and they also, so here on this car you have a Renault 5 where the wireless charging plate is. They have that also there, and on the charging port they have the little inscriptions on the thing to make out the letters for Nissan in Japanese.
Nice.
So they have put their own little...
Anything distinctive? I mean, apart from the obvious design, have they done anything differently in terms of battery sizes, power, etc. for the Micra?
No.
All the same?
The exact same power outputs, big battery, small battery. The interior, as I said, is very, very similar. They've even left in this patterned roof, which the Renault 5 is now famous for. Obviously, the air intake... Now, charging display is not on the bonnet. They've put their own curved eyebrow type lights on the front. But, this is the most powerful Micra they've ever had. It's potentially the funkiest looking. It has a pretty nice... There's 14 different colour combinations when you include changing the roof colour compared to the rest of the car. So it's definitely not a granny mobile anymore. The main thing that has to be right with it is, if you can buy a Renault 5 for a shade under 26 grand, you're always going to buy a Renault 5 rather than a Micra, no?
Well, I would have thought so, but maybe
So-
there are people who have a certain fondness. Like both of these cars are really plucking at the heartstrings of nostalgia. So maybe there are people whose their first car was a Micra, or they learned to drive in a Micra, or whatever. So there might be the fact that the Renault 5 doesn't mean anything to them. So
Yeah, they are absolutely, and that's a very accountant type of answer, because my next question was, do they need to sell the Micra cheaper than the Renault 5 because it's not a Renault 5?
I would have thought so. You would hope that they've done their due diligence rather than just sticking the car out and hoping for the best. But Nissan need a win. They really need a win. Their numbers aren't brilliant, and there's their sales figures in Europe, sales figures are certainly across in the US. They're in the US in particular, they're hemorrhaging money, so they really need a win soon, and hopefully this'll do that for them.
I mean, the US are probably only really interested in, as cars we know in this side of the world, the X-Trail. Really?
Pathfinder,
Yeah.
those sorts of larger SUV. Armada was another one they had there. But I was listening to a US podcast this week, Doug DeMora's one, and they were just talking about the fact that they are absolutely, they're losing billions in the US market currently. So they really need a win pretty soon too.
They are about to unveil a new Nissan Leaf also, which will be in the next little while. That's their own car.
Yeah, so the Leaf, obviously the OG of the EV world, but I'm presume it's going to start becoming in line. No more shadow mode, CCS charging, probably a bigger battery. So there won't be hopefully any compromise in owning a Leaf anymore. Whereas there has been a little bit. If you wanted a cheap car now, the current Leaf is one of the cheapest EVs you can buy,
Yeah.
and obviously if you want a cheap run around, you can pick up an early Leaf, which is going to be an 80 to 100 kilometre range car on a good day for a couple of grand.
I was talking to a Nissan, I suppose, I don't know if they're called dealer principals, but that's kind of what he is, a few weeks ago. And of course you could say, well, he would say that, but I was asking him about not even stuff that they're maybe selling anymore because they don't retail cars that old. But I was saying, like, what sort of state of health are you seeing on old Leafs? And he said they're still coming back, some of them at 93, 94%.
Which is incredible. I mean, look, obviously it's a lot of it is how they were driven, etc. So, it depends on how they were treated. But look, for a lot of people who are just nip into the shops and want to dip their toe into the EV world, you're talking a very limited and small outlay just to get into an EV like that, yeah?
I'm trying to think, what else have I been driving that's been...
Well, it's been a few weeks, so there must have been a few. You've been in and out of airports, so
I have done a few. Well, I drove the Renault 4 as well. That was also nice.
great video on that, actually. By the way, you go and check out that on Nobby on Cars. I really enjoyed that video, actually.
The weather was lovely.
So the Renault 4, of course, we remember them from on Pust vans and Aircom vans, and over the years. Is it the same sort of vibe as this Renault 5 we're in, but with a slightly bigger rear space? Is it a roomier car?
It is a bit roomier. It's still not, a huge canyon behind the driver's seat, depending on who's driving it. The boot is bigger. It's a taller car, I suppose. Yeah, it's got a bigger footprint. Not quite as sharp to drive as this, but on the other hand, it's a bit more comfortable because it's dampened a little bit differently, and still, I mean, I think. Is there only so far retro is there, how big is the pool of retro customers? So will the Renault 5 sell more than it? I'd imagine so. Are there plans for a commercial one? Not yet, apparently, but I think it could work as a commercial vehicle.
And do we know, when it comes, pricing, anything like that?
Not yet. I was just told it would be considerably under 30.
Okay. Considerably is a good word.
Yeah.
Domestically, and you've done it before, recently we had the Dacia Bigster. Now it's here. First impressions?
Still a pretty affordable car. I mean, it is only a tenner under €30,000, and actually by the time you add your delivery charges and all that stuff, it is going to be over 30. That's a pity because it's a 25 grand car in Europe all day long.
But I watched your video on it, and do check it out on Nobby on Cars if you get a chance. You did a video at the day of the launch, and you were talking about it in terms of being a Tiguan rival, at a significantly lower price point.
Yeah, I mean, it is a Tiguan rival if you compare it, as in it's a car that can carry a family, it's a car that can carry 5 people, and it has a good sized boot.
But in terms of us quibbling over it being less than 30 grand, I mean, I think it has some wiggle room to be over it, and considering if you want the physical space, if you want the bulk of that EV, that high up stance, this boot space, the rear space, for a lot less than you're
Yeah, I
going to
mean,
be paying.
even compared to a Qashqai, it's going to be considerably cheaper.
There is a bit of wipe clean to the interior and a bit of, underneath the wheel arches,
Yeah,
there are evidence of
yeah.
lower grade quality materials. But look,
I did notice compared to the international launch was earlier on this year, and there is no doubt those cars had different prep, particularly when you go digging under the boot. As soon as I went looking under the Irish cars, I was seeing exposed metal way quicker than I was seeing on those cars.
Right, okay.
I know we've spoken about this before, but yeah, sometimes it does happen. But yeah, I mean,
and we have to talk about your stat from the last time as well, of it being the first Dacia to have a sunroof.
it does an opening sunroof, yeah, which is nice because I am a fan of a sunroof, but only when they can open. These glass houses, I know they say, oh, they don't get as hot and they have solar reflection. I'm just not into a sun. If it doesn't open, what's the point?
Well, a car you and I both drove pretty recently. I just outed it was the Volkswagen ID Buzz 7-seater.
Yeah.
Well, I really did like
great.
it. What a family car. I mean, is it possibly the perfect family car?
Well, the most memorable thing for me for the Buzz, well, two things really, is how it looks, because, it just looks great. And that car now is out, coming up on, is it 4 years?
No, Buzz is maybe
Well, it's definitely 3.
2 to 3, yeah.
Because I was definitely at the launch at the end of
Yeah.
22 maybe. And the second thing is how much, like, no matter what your 7-seater is, if it's a Volvo XC90, if it's a Kia EV9, none of them you can comfortably sit as an adult in the third row.
No,
And you can in the Buzz.
it's enormous. It's plenty of space in the second row. Though that third row can come out as well, of course. But I would, as a 6'2" guy, I would quite happily sit in the rearmost seats.
Yeah.
With my air conditioning, with my USB-C, and yeah, it's a heavy vehicle. Yes, the aerodynamics are dog shit because it's like a brick, but it's, range. Like, I wasn't seeing much more than sort of 21, 22 kilowatts per 100 on a good day, nice sunny conditions. So I would say
I did see 15 the day I collected it.
I saw that at the start
on
of
the
your video.
motorway.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe it was
Blake
whoever,
Boland, I would imagine.
who was driving before me. Yeah.
Almost certainly Blake Boland, yeah.
One of these EV lunatics
Yeah.
who can drive 700 kilometers without stopping for a wee.
Yeah.
Here's a weird one. So there's a recall on the ID Buzz. I think it is the long wheelbase. It is, yeah, in America, because the rear bench is too wide, and they're afraid that another passenger will plonk their bottom in
the middle.
between the two other passengers, and there's no seatbelt.
And there's no warning.
And that sums up how stupid some Americans are.
Yeah. One thing I know I didn't like about that car, and I don't know if you'd noticed it, I kept finding that the seatbelt kept falling down into the tiny little hole by the driver's door. I kept having to dig out the seatbelt out of the side there.
It wasn't twisted or anything, was it? Or?
No, when you'd open the door, there was a little slot, and the seatbelt itself kept falling down it.
Wow.
Small, minor quibble.
Didn't
But
notice that.
Never mind. But look, what a car! What a great vehicle.
Great vehicle. Look, it is perhaps, on the expensive side, like a lot of new cars. However, I challenge you to find really a 7-seater with that much space for that price. New.
We have another new entrant to the market. Gowan Auto have announced they're going to be the national importer for Leapmotor. Now,
was wondering.
I don't know who Leapmotor are.
Okay, so I was wondering, first of all, who was going to, if anyone was going to get involved in this company. Now, for those of you watching a lot of football, you will have noticed Leapmotor on even some Irish games. There was a Leinster game I was at a few months ago in the Aviva, and they had Leapmotor. It was Croke Park. They had Leapmotor signs all over the pitch.
Before people knew what it was, they've just been
Yeah.
planting the seed,
Yeah.
so to speak. Okay, interesting.
So they do need, obviously, a big automotive house to push them in Ireland. I was wondering, would MDL be the natural home, because they're the home of Xpeng and BYD, but also I suppose there's no point if one house has all these Chinese brands. There needs to be competition. So this is good news.
But just reading the press release here, that's they've appointed some really, really strong people to look after it. So It'll be spearheaded by Managing Director of Gowan, James Brooks. We have Steve McGrath, formerly of the Volkswagen Group Ireland Parish, who's formerly Head of Product and Pricing at Peugeot and DS, who's Brand Manager. Mark Brennan, formerly Marketing Executive DS Ireland, has been appointed Marketing Manager. So that's a really strong team. So that, they looks like they're taking this one seriously.
Yeah.
What are we looking at with these? Is it another sort of variant of various EV SUVs?
Well, the larger car is. Look, they were coming here one way or another. So, the people at Gowan know how to,
So in the
launch a
release we
car.
have the TO3, a compact B segment hatchback offered in the at an A segment price. The C10 is a D segment SUV. And the B10 is a C SUV-sized vehicle. So a few models coming by the sounds of things.
Yeah. And I don't know what Gowan are going to do. Are they going to put these cars into some of their existing showrooms? They are, encouraging investment. They've just announced a new Honda dealership because Klonsky Motors, for those of you familiar with it, I only drove by it today. It had huge signs, retirement sale in the windows. I imagine Klonsky Motors are the home of, will be very, very fancy apartments in the next couple of years, just across the road from UCD, for those familiar with it.
We're recording this on the eve of Bank Holiday weekend. All joking aside, traditionally a pretty rubbish month or British period for the roads.
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, even the weekend just gone, there was, I think, three women killed. Five.
Five as of this week. Yeah,
Wow.
we had a lady in County Louth in her 80s. So that brought the fatalities to 5 this week. At time of recording. So yeah, look, the RSA are obviously urging, as usual, slow down. This time they're really focusing on drink driving for this bank holiday weekend. I know that it's been traditionally a bad weekend for the roads. I remember figures of around 600 collisions over the course of a bank holiday weekend and years gone by.
600, wow.
And we've seen weekends where there's been 9-10 more fatalities. So look, just if you are listening, do slow down, throw the phone in the glove box. And it's not; those calls aren't that important.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before. We don't. There's no learnings from these tragic fatal accidents. From my perspective, we don't find out what was the cause. Really, you don't. I mean, there might be a coroner's report someday, but the other thing that I suppose isn't the human side of blame. And I spoke to a guy recently who lives in Wexford, and he was talking about the same stretch of road near him. There's been multiple people killed over the years. There's always talk of we're going to upgrade that bit of road, and it just doesn't necessarily happen. And whether it's a bad bend, whether it's incorrect road markings, whether there should be more. I find those signs that flash back at you with your speed are quite effective. They always make me go, oh.
And do you know what? We will hopefully have someone from the Road Safety Authority coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if you do have questions for them, please do send them on driversrepublicpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, if you have any questions, do send them on.
Right. Next up on the podcast, we need to get into the heads of the people of Ford Ireland and Ford UK. And we're going to be talking to Lisa Brankin, who's basically the boss. Welcome back to the Drivers Republic podcast, which is brought to you by Dundee Motors, home of the Trusted Dealer Programme, helping you buy with confidence from verified dealerships. Paddy, hello.
Hello, Mark. Good to be back after what was a short break of just a few weeks, but
Yes.
Season 2 begins again, and we feel very delighted to be joined in this possibly boiling hot room in a Dublin hotel by Lisa Brankin from Ford UK, Chair of Ford and Managing Director of Ford UK and Ireland. Welcome to Dublin. Not your first time in Dublin, I suspect.
No, it's not my first time in Dublin, but thank you very much for inviting me and having me on the podcast.
So, look, tell us a little bit about your story. From that accent, you're not far from Dublin.
So I grew up just outside Lisburn, which is in County Antrim.
Yeah.
I went to school there, went to university in Belfast, and then found myself, couldn't get a job at home,
Right.
went across to the southeast to work, and I ended up on a graduate training programme with Ford, thinking that I would kind of work there for a couple of years and, come home, and I never did. And that's sort of it.
But I mean, your story is incredible, an incredible rise through the ranks, and you know, for people who are listening as well, quite an inspirational story for people who start off in a career. And you know, we talk about apprenticeships. It was pretty much an apprenticeship
Yeah.
what you did, and now you have the number one job. So
Although, to be honest, I look back to joining Ford and what I was like as a graduate trainee, and honest to goodness, I think I would have, if it was me, I think I would have sacked me. So fortunately, people were very patient and they gave me a chance to try lots of different stuff. And I learned a lot, and I've done lots of different jobs through my career. I've now called it a career. Before I thought it was just a job. And yeah, I've had a really good time and I've really enjoyed it. And I've worked with lots of really great people, and it's been really good.
set the scene of Ford and the car industry when you started. When you were starting as a trainee, what did the industry look like, and what does it look like now in comparison?
So it was much so fewer manufacturers in Ireland and in the UK and in the rest of Europe. We had many, many more dealers, much more traditional. At the time, I didn't realise this, but probably not really an industry where lots of women worked. But again, that hadn't occurred to me as a thing to think about. And it's changed very much over the years. Many more manufacturers, many more models. What we sell, the way we sell it's different. Technology's moved on in leaps and bounds. And it's actually just an outrageously competitive industry to work in. But one of the things that's been great about it is that it's constantly changing and evolving. So you're never doing the same thing too long before it changes, and you've got to adapt. And certainly in the past 5 years, since we kind of all hit COVID, semiconductors, electrification, it's become even more challenging.
When you mention gender, and it wasn't a thing for you, it wasn't a noticeable thing, do you think the car industry in general is now more welcoming to women? Workshops are not these freezing cold, dirty places anymore if you're going to start at that level and that area of the industry?
Two things have changed. I think young women are a little bit bolder in terms of where they're prepared to go work and what they're prepared to do. They don't really conform as much as maybe my generation would have done. And I think, in Ireland, you've got a really low unemployment rate. So you kind of got to open or broaden your horizons about who you're going to employ. I know that a few of the dealerships in Ireland have got young women technicians and young women apprentices. So I think people's perspectives have changed as to, what the workplace needs to look like. And also I think my perception is that as men have grown up and have become, the younger generation of men have grown up and become parents, they're more involved in childcare. So if you got someone at work saying, actually, I need to go and pick my child up from school, that could sometimes be as much a man having to do that as a woman. So I think, the perceptions of how you work has changed as well. So I just think the world's a very different place.
I spoke to a guy a few weeks ago who was getting 6 months off for paternity. And my youngest child is nearly 7, but it was 2 weeks even then.
Yes.
So, and that time it's kind of changed so much. So it's a very interesting point that you raised because, I think employers, they've definitely had to adapt as well. I don't know if this kind of stuff would reach your desk. Probably you don't have people saying, oh, look, I don't know, the child has a dental appointment at 11:30. Can I have an hour off work? But would you be one of those leaders who sort of, look, I don't need to hear about this, just as long as everyone's happy and the work's done?
So I think that it's different depending on where you work.
Yeah.
So if you work in Ford and you work on a production line, you can't just nip out for half an hour, right? Or if you are a technician in a workshop, you can't work remotely. You've got to come into work. But by and large, before COVID, we had reasonably flexible policies in the sense that as long as the important thing is that things get done. Yeah. It's not necessarily that it has to be done at this time on a Tuesday. It's important that they get done. And you sort of have to have a degree of trust in the people that work with you, because otherwise it all just sort of falls apart. And also, if you manage people, you can't do everything yourself. You have to trust them and let them go on and do it. So there's an element of that. But I think also post-COVID, having those felt like endless weeks of everybody working remotely has changed a little bit of the way that we manage people and how they work. And also when you've got a workforce that isn't in the office 9 to 5 every day, who's and like you kind of don't know what everybody's doing all the time. So you've got to stop focusing on desk time and face time and focus on output and how things get done, I think.
It's about treating people as adults as well, and just, having a trust in the people around you and letting them get on with it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think most people on most days live up to that.
Yeah, but you're right, because I mean, at your job, you can't. I'm sure you don't want to, but you can't micromanage everybody. You get nothing done.
But I mean, honestly, I couldn't do half the jobs of people that work for me anyway. So it'd be useful, to give me some of the things to do. So yeah, you just have to trust people.
What do you think? In what job in Ford could you think off the top of your head that if you had to start doing it tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, for one day, would be, oh my God, I don't even know where to start.
So obviously, if we kind of rule out all the stuff, obviously our engineering teams are really highly qualified and they really know what they're doing, and I'm not, so I couldn't do that. But the worst thing for me would be to give me a massive spreadsheets that I've got to automate and make work effectively with accurate data, and that would probably not be good in any kind of way at all.
Okay, I love the honesty.
As one of the most senior women in the car industry as a whole, what advice would you give to particularly young women who are considering a role now? There's so much variety and so much change over the last 20, 30 years in the industry. What advice would you give to a 17 or 18-year-old, or even to a young you all those years ago who was starting off? What would you say to them?
So I think that one, I'd say to people that they should consider the automotive industry, because it's changed a lot and it's a really interesting and dynamic place to be, with a range of different kind of jobs. So if you look at our franchise dealers, they've got jobs in finance, they've got jobs in HR, they've got jobs in marketing, they've got jobs in PR. So you aren't just, if you kind of think that you're going to work in a workshop or work in a showroom, there are lots of other options. And the other thing I'd say is be confident and in your own ability, and just, you've kind of got nothing to lose. People say to you, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? And the worst thing is you don't get the job. And does that matter? No, it doesn't. You move on to the next one. And if you join and maybe start in a direction that isn't quite what you want, you can change. Nowadays, well, apart from me, obviously, but nobody has a job for life. They change direction, they alter, they course correct. So I just think you should just try it and go for it, is what I would say, and have confidence in yourself as you step forward.
When you mentioned job for life there, is it just one of those things you can't imagine yourself doing something else?
Well, the thing is, so I think people move jobs when they get bored of what they're doing and they want a new challenge. And when I joined Ford, our European headquarters were based in the UK and I was based in that building. So there were lots of different opportunities. So when I got a bit fed up or bored, I sort of looked around and saw vacancies and thought, well, I'll see if I can do that. So I was really fortunate. I'm not going to tell you how long I worked for, because that'll tell you how old I am. But I worked for them for a really long time, and sort of every few years I change roles. So I think I've probably done between 15 and 17 jobs in the time I've been with Ford. So I've kind of bounced around and done lots of different stuff. So I never really got to the stage where I was really, really, that I wanted a change, I couldn't have one. And maybe that shows a tremendous lack of imagination. But I've just been really fortunate and being given a chance to do stuff.
You must be a fast learner as well, to be able to, do so many roles within the one company and have to hit the ground running every time, probably.
Well, have you heard the expression, you fake it, you make it?
I have.
There you go.
That's how we live our lives, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
So can you tell us, one of the reasons you're here is obviously talk about Ford's electric strategy and the power promise. It's been a pretty good year so far in Ireland for EV sales. It's been a nice bounce back compared to last year. So what's it all about?
So we've just completed the launch of our full passenger vehicle electric lineup. So we've got our smallest vehicle, Puma, is now electric. We've got an Explorer, a Capri, and a bigger Mustang Mach-E. So they're all in the marketplace. And we have been talking to customers and hearing what they're saying about electrification, and we know that some people have some concerns about making a transition into electric. So we thought we'd come up with a power promise to help reassure customers. So charging is a big deal for customers. So we're giving away a free home charger with a standard installation. We know that customers are concerned about what might happen if they can't charge if they run out of charge on the road. So we're giving away 5-year free servicing, and also with that comes roadside assistance. And if for any reason you run out of charge, your vehicle gets recovered to a charge point or home. We also know that customers are really concerned about battery life. They think that a car battery is a bit like a phone battery. So we're giving an 8-year warranty on our batteries. And allied to that, we've got the Blue Oval charging network and Ford Pass, which just helps make planning your journeys and billing for charging a lot easier. So we tried to think of all the things that people might be a bit worried about and put this little package of offers together to give people the confidence to hopefully buy electric, and if not buy, to come and try electric. And that's on cars, and also we've got a range of electric and some plug-in hybrid commercial vehicles coming as well.
And I know this has come up at other events. Is there a limit to how many times Ford will send a truck to you if you deliberately keep running out of battery?
No. No, there isn't.
Because it probably doesn't happen very much anyway, but it is a layer of peace of mind.
I don't think, actually, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer off my head about how many times that people are recovered without charge, but I think it's virtually none. But that's a bit of information that I really should know, and I need to find that out.
The only thing I'll add to that is there's a finite amount of times your EV will like running out of charge.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't particularly enjoy that.
No.
A bit. So well, let's not worry about that part.
No.
It might and it might not happen. Just in relation to that, do you think, obviously at the start of the EV journey, the customers were really, really super educated because they were the real early adopters.
That's right.
They often knew more than the sales staff, and they were, they were coming in armed with all this knowledge and would probably put up with a bit of the gremlins at the time. We're beyond the gremlin stage, really. Range is pretty good. But as we get to the point where it's a really wide group of people buying EVs, are you seeing that you're nearly having to start again in some cases with the education process?
So I think that there are a lot of misunderstandings out there around electric vehicles, mostly because I think, so we talk about buying electric as though you're saying to somebody, oh, well, you're driving diesel, why don't you have a petrol? When actually it is a bigger change than that for someone. And I think there's a lot of kind of barriers and people are making up reasons why not. And I think, yes, it is a switch. Yes, it's a change in how you drive and how you don't go to petrol stations, you charge at home. And I think there may be a few customers where it's not relevant for, but I think it's more relevant for more people than maybe they give them credit for. And I suppose the power promise is our way of trying to start a conversation to try to get people to consider it. And actually, when you consider it and actually think about the way that most people drive on most days, electric is really usable. I think I saw some stats in Ireland that says most people's journey is less than 20 kilometres. And I mean, if you did 20 kilometres a day, you be charging every, I don't know how many weeks, but it's not terribly frequently, and you can charge at home. And also the cost of running of an EV is significantly less than a petrol or diesel. So there's lots of really rational reasons. It's just trying to overcome that inertia or concern that customers have got.
Yeah, certainly CSO stats would back that up. Even nationally, the average commute is less than 50 kilometres a round trip. So certainly, I think we've talked to other industry leaders, and they've said similar things, that we're now at a stage where people coming in really don't have any perception because it wasn't on their radar. But now there's so much choice, and I think that's probably what's interesting about this power promise and what you're talking about today is that you're preempting a lot of the things that people might be concerned about and saying, okay, don't worry about this, don't worry about this, don't worry about this. Here's the car. It's pretty much the same as you've been used to. Off you go. And I think that's pretty clever. I think
we take a step. If you've had an electric vehicle and used it, you probably don't. We underestimate concerns that people might have, which is why I think it's really important that we get people into electric vehicles. And even the first time that I borrowed an electric vehicle, I remember taking it to the first public charging point and not even having a clue how to plug the darn thing in. So all that basic stuff that if you've done it once or twice, it's really familiar. But if you've never done it ever before, you can't really imagine what it's like. And we need to help people with all
It's
of that.
overwhelming for people. Yeah, it
Yeah.
can be. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, when you kind of rock up and you've got to have 42 different apps on your phone because you don't, you know, all that sort of stuff's really hard. So that's why we encourage them. If you aren't kind of walking in to buy today, come in to have a conversation and for sure try to test drive and see what it's like.
And is there the facility for people to sort of borrow the car for an hour or a few hours just to say, look, this is what I'm thinking of, but without having to commit to anything too serious just yet?
I mean, obviously, I would desperately hope that all the Ford dealers in the Republic are desperately trying to sell everybody an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
But if you show an interest, then they'll be really happy to let you test drive.
On that note, actually, so over the last few years, and your career is so rich in Ford's history, my first car was a Fiesta. My second car was a Focus. Don't know about you, Paddy.
There's been some there, yeah.
There's been a few in the heritage, but if you're not ready to go electric at the moment, Ford don't have a huge array of non-electric passenger cars for customers. The Fiesta has disappeared, although maybe it'll come back someday. The Focus is finishing up. The Mondeo. There's a huge legacy of cars there that, you know, aren't available anymore. Is that going to be like that forever, do you think, or?
So, so I don't have any news that I can tell you right now. I think what we've done as a manufacturer is thought about where we can be profitable. So it's really important that we can sell a range of cars and vans, and it allows us to be profitable. And we've picked the segments where we think we can win. And actually what people buy is changing. So if you unpeel all the sales stats and look at the types of cars that people are buying in Ireland, that Fiesta segment, that B segment has disappeared to virtually nothing. And all the kind of vehicles that people are buying are sort of semi-SUV shaped vehicles. So things like Pumas, Kugas, Explorers, that's where the market is. So we've kind of followed the market, and to some degree or a lesser degree, the whole of Europe is going in that direction. So a bit of the changes we've made have been because of the market. Some of it's because of the transition to electrification. And remember that the EU and Ireland have said they're going to ban the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles in 2035. So we've kind of got a trajectory we've got to get to. So our lineup on cars reflects that, and to some degree on commercial vehicles as well.
And does your current lineup sort of allow Ford to have a wait and see approach? It must be very frustrating as a car maker when the EU keeps saying, oh, well, maybe 2030, 35, oh, well, we're not sure.
So it's really hard to plan when developing a car takes a really long time and it costs an awful lot of money. And you've got to kind of bet where the market's going to go. And based on, you know, really clear and firm EU direction, we've kind of bet on our vehicle lineup. Now, we've still got petrol for sale in Ireland, and on commercial vehicles we've got diesel on sale. But we are slowly and surely transitioning into, particularly on commercial vehicles, plug-in hybrid and then battery electric vehicles, because that's sort of a direction of travel. And obviously we've got, like all manufacturers, we've got European CO2 requirements and targets to hit as well. So all in all, it's kind of like 4 or 5 moving targets you're trying to hit as you're transitioning through.
It's kind of like whack-a-mole.
It is a wee bit.
Making cars for Europe.
It is, yes.
There's been a real resurgence recently of designers, manufacturers looking back. You know, lots of retro designs. I arrived here in a Renault 5 EV.
Yes.
People were stopping, having conversations, photographs. Other brands are doing it as well. You know, Ford has such a rich history and heritage of models that mean an awful lot to people, especially, you know, Ireland's a small market, but we had our assembly in Cork till '84. I'm not asking you to tell us any secrets, but do you think that's something that Ford might look at in the future of really, like, whatever about calling a model a Capri, of really dipping into that heritage, and the fact that with EVs it's like scale electrics, you can have a platform and you can put whatever the hell you want on top. You know, is that something that could happen?
So anything could happen.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
You can make a free someday.
Anything could happen.
Would you like to see that happen?
Well,
As a Ford fan?
Well, I think it'd be really exciting to see what's possible. And I'm really going to take back the message that it's just like to our designer team, tell them it's just like Skeptics. I don't know what's so hard about it. So I'm going to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll be shot for that one.
Yeah, good.
So look, as an industry leader, what excites you about the industry currently and the future of mobility?
So I think, so there's been a huge number of challenges that we've been facing, and sometimes you get a bit bogged down in that. But actually what I think is the most exciting stuff that we've been doing is where we've been actively coming into the market with things that help customers. And one of the bits of the market that I'm really excited about is commercial vehicles, actually. Okay. I think we've thought about great products. So we've got a completely new commercial vehicle lineup. And we're bringing, I mentioned before, we've got a range of plug-in hybrids, also electric versions of those commercial vehicles. But more than that, we're focusing on what we can do with data to help improve, we call it uptime, so the amount of time a van's on the road for customers, i.e. they don't have breakdowns. So we can look at data, providing we've got the right data sharing in place that can tell us, actually, this van has got higher oil wear, so this needs to have oil replacement sooner than that van. And what that means is if you do that preventative work, it can prevent an engine blowing up and prevent a catastrophic time off the road and cost for a company. So I'm really excited about the start we've made in that space and the direction of travel that we're going there.
Some of the clever things that I've loved in Fords over the years, whether it's the transit steering wheel that you could use your laptop on, the Gigabox, the Megabox in the Puma, like the boot is ridiculously big for the size of the car, and you can drain it if you get dirty football boots. Do people knock on your door and say, I had this great idea, what do you think?
So actually, there's a little group of people based in East London, and their kind of reason for living is to think about solutions to problems that customers have got. So the steering wheel came from them, and they spent some time with people that drive transits. And one of the things they observed was that they use their cab space as an office, but they'd nowhere to put their laptop or to write on. And that was a cardboard cutout, made up thing that then got put into production. So there are people somewhere in Ford doing odd and weird things to see how we improve products.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, and some of the stuff is, even in the Capri and the Explorer, the way you can lock away your items.
Yes.
If you don't want to, we're forced so many times now to bring our phone with you for a walk, even if you don't want to bring your phone with you. In that car, you can lock it away and no one can get at it. Paddy would like to ask you a question about savoury items on the north of the border versus the south of the border.
So I'm not going to get involved in this debate because I
what we're gonna
understand how really emotive it is. I just want to tell you that I'm right. So
Right. Okay.
I don't think I've ever tried Northern.
I have. I went to Queen's University.
Right.
I spent my 3 years in Belfast. So yeah. Northern Ireland Tato versus Republic of Ireland Tato.
Is better.
Which is better?
Well, obviously the Northern Irish version.
Right.
I mean,
do you not think they're a bit damp?
no, I don't. And also the packaging colour's wrong down here as well. So I think you just need to sort it all out, chaps.
Right. Okay. Well, look, we asked the cutting edge question, so we're on the fence for that one.
Speaking of colours, actually, because the new Puma Gen E comes in this lovely bright yellow, as does the Capri. But year after year, especially in Ireland anyway, grey, silver,
Yes.
black. Can you tell people listening to stop being afraid of brighter? Is it a used car problem down the road, or why is it?
So I think some of it's about just people being really conservative and concerned about used car values, because there is a perception that if you've got your bright yellow or bright green or bright orange, that you might love it, but nobody else will. And I'm sure there's enough customers out there to want to buy a second-hand bright yellow.
Yeah.
But I think Ford are one of the few brands left now offering interesting colours, and obviously some others are, but it's some brands. Literally, you look at their brochure and it's grey, black, white.
I think it's kind of safe, isn't it?
Well, it is safe, yeah.
Confusing in the car park, but safe.
Tell us a little bit about your car history. Can you remember where did you learn to drive in? What was your first few cars?
So my dad was a coalman,
Right.
and he had a TK Bedford, and he taught me how to move that around our yard. So
Brilliant.
that's how I learned to drive-ish, sort of. And then when I passed my test, he had a Chevette van, and that was all I was allowed to drive. So after that, everything else was a vast improvement.
See, but there must have been some interesting Fords over the years.
Please say you had a Focus RS as a company car. Or
I
something.
did have a Focus RS as a company car, which was really great. I didn't have any points in my license at the end of that, so that was a big success. I've recently just changed in one of our 3-litre petrol Ranger Raptors, which was lovely. I can recommend that to anybody. And I'm currently driving a Focus ST, just to kind of have a final hurrah before that goes.
It's a bit like asking, what's your favourite child, but if you have a favourite Ford of all time.
Oh, that's a really difficult question.
Might be one you need to pass on, but it's
So I think the
interesting to find
thing.
out.
So probably the car that I've probably driven most, if I look back over my time and forward, the one that I've kind of gone back to would have been a Fiesta ST, I think.
Fabulous car.
Yeah, that probably
Mark,
would.
yours?
That is still, and at the time of filming, maybe 4 years ago, it was €29,000. It's still one of my favourite ever press cars to have. It's just the pops and bangs, the drama.
Lots of fun.
You can leave. No one's going to key it. They might try and nick it because it's a desirable car, but apart from that, it'll be left alone. Just a great car, and also when the Focus launched and that Focus RS, I'll never forget watching the episode of Top Gear where they had that car, and it was just amazing.
Mine's different. Ford Racing Puma.
Oh, yes.
What a car.
Thought about
That was just a work of art.
So actually, I thought so Ford Racing Puma was great, but the normal Puma, the 1.7 engine, was really great as well.
Brilliant
That was
car,
a
brilliant car.
nice car. I was
You
involved in that program.
You still see a few around as well, but there's still a handful of racing Pumas here, and that was oh my god, such a car.
The wheels, the flayed arches, the buckets,
And it properly, the exhaust had a little bark and cough and spark out the back. It was a fabulous thing. If I was to finish up, in terms of, if I could ask you one government policy in either UK or Ireland that you could change or that would make the industry a little bit easier and also for EV adoption, what would you ask for?
So I think I'm not going to answer that question directly, but what I'm going to say to you is that where EV adoption has worked really, really well is Norway. So they're basically an electric market, and they've done that transition relatively quickly. And to do that, they had policy that was really joined up. So they had taxation, they had incentives, they had the bus lanes. You could use a bus lane if you had an EV. Their parking incentives, everything was joined up to focus everyone on transitioning into EVs. And I guess I would say to UK government and the Irish government, if that's kind of where you want to get to, then you kind of need to have joined up policy, because it doesn't kind of work just one thing or another.
Lisa Brankin, are we allowed to call you the Queen of Ford?
No, I don't think you can.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Stay with us. There's more to come on this first episode of Season 2 on the Drivers Republic podcast. We have a reader/listener's question.
Welcome back to the Drivers Republic podcast, brought to you in association with Dundee Motors, where more Irish drivers find their next car from a trusted dealership than anywhere else. Why? Because Dundeal's Trusted Dealer programme means verified dealerships and the kind of backup that matters, like warranties and history checks, giving you confidence from your very first click. And speaking of choosing your next car, we've had an email, and it's coming to us from a reader, and his name is.
And don't forget, if you'd like to send us an email or a query, a question about going electric, used car, should I still buy a diesel? Anything you like, driverspublicpodcast@gmail.com is how you'll get us.
So Paul Crocken has got in touch. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. But he says, "Hi there, I am of an age where my next car could be my last car to buy." Take it handy there. As you never know when you may not be able to afford a new car or indeed be able to drive. My car history is Fords. So we talked to the right person today. Up to 2010, then Qashqai with one Mokka. Current car is a 212 Qashqai with just 18,500 kilometres. You've had a lot of Qashqais, Mark. My last 3 cars were Qashqais, and my usage is mainly long trips. And the Qashqai is so comfortable. I never know when I get out of it that I've been driving for 2 hours.
There you go.
Born in the 1960s, geez, you're only a young fella. I have a fondness for the new Renault 4 as my first EV. I went to see the model in Dundrum Shopping Centre in April. It is nice but smaller than the Qashqai. Obviously, there is a wait before dealers will talk on price. I've been pricing new and pre-registered 2025 Qashqais, and I'm considering being offered 60 to 68% trade-in value of my own with nearly new cars, well discounted, circa 13% off the new price. Oh, you've done your research. It is tempting to buy an e-Power Qashqai. The size is good and the price is attractive. I am obviously getting a good trade-in from garages that sell Nissan. Do I wait and take a chance on getting a car my heart wants, Renault 4, or do I buy with my head and grab a 251 Qashqai e-Power? Please help, Paul.
Well, first thing I'd say to you is they're a good option scenario comparison, if that all makes sense, because Windsor Motors will sell both cars you're talking about. So in theory, you should be able to trade in your Nissan and versus a Renault, and it shouldn't make a difference that you're not going back to the same brand, because essentially they'll put your Qashqai in one of their dealers and away you go. The e-Power Qashqai is essentially doing what a lot of Toyotas and stuff have tried to do. It's a self-charging hybrid, but the battery motor actually powers the wheels of the car. Petrol engine tops up the battery. Quite smooth to drive. My experience of it was I didn't find the fuel efficiency hugely different. It was better, but hugely different between that and the other versions. There was a 1.2 Qashqai, or was it maybe 1.3 actually? It was the one we had for quite a while, which I actually found relatively thirsty. It was like 8-9 litres per 100 kilometres.
Right.
If you do really want the Renault 4, I'd hang on and wait. Yes, it is a little bit smaller than a Qashqai. It doesn't sit as high as a Qashqai. I don't know if your seating position will be quite the same.
And by the sounds of things, Paul's not going to be bringing a whole lot of passengers.
He doesn't mention that, yeah.
So
I don't think a Qashqai is not built to the same focus of cost. I don't think.
As the Renault 4?
No.
Okay.
Like, for example, I don't know if you've realised this, Paddy, but if I open the window of this car, it was just put on the ignition further there. So, windows going down. Now, look, this is probably proper car nerd stuff, but listen to this.
Oh, I've seen you do this. Yeah. Insulation.
So that's the roof of the Renault 5. Windows going bang up. And look, they had to. One of the reasons probably for that is weight. Steel is so much more. The life cycle of steel. Yes, you can do stuff with aluminium as well, but it's much cheaper to do stuff with steel.
Right.
Even in the afterlife of it being in the car. So I don't know the specific reason for that being that tinny, but I guarantee if you tap the roof of a Qashqai, it won't sound like that. And my only concern for this, by the way, is if it's pelting down rain.
It's going to be noisy.
Will this sound like you're sitting in an old shed with those kind of...
Well, it's lucky it doesn't rain in Ireland then, Mark.
No, exactly. So I don't think you're comparing the same type of car. Paul probably knows that, really. But all that said, and the Qashqai's had a nice facelift this year. Back hasn't really changed, but the front is quite different now. Is it the same kind of personality type of car?
Does
No.
it have, but Qashqai doesn't have a huge amount, does it? Personality at all?
No, but that's what I mean. And look, you could definitely argue the Qashqai is one of those boring cars in the world. But people like boring. Look at the amount of Qashqais they've sold. They're still built in Sunderland.
Yeah, it's boring in its efficiency and being excellent at what it does.
It's a Toyota Corolla.
Yeah.
For Nissan. That's what it is. And I think, we had like 4 of them in the house, and we've moved to an Aria now. Hey, it was so different.
I'm reading between the lines of this email, and I think Paul wants to make a bold choice.
He's tired of cod and chips for dinner.
Yeah.
And he'd like maybe...
He'd like a little bit of sushi.
Yeah.
Well, it's French. He's probably talking something a little bit more exotic.
It'll still be
Foie
raw,
gras.
though. It'll still be raw.
Yeah, exactly.
French and raw.
Raw meat,
Or
chopped up in a
Japanese
bowl.
and
Exactly. Buy a Renault 4.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that whole Windsor thing is helpful.
Then you can
because-
go and drive side by side.
Yeah, exactly. I will say, I just check. I don't know if you do use some on finance. Obviously, you're getting a good trade-in price and all that. Just check the APR on Renault. Not always the best,
No, certainly not.
and can make cars. I remember we nearly looked at an Arcana instead of one of the Qashqais, and the Arcana was well received in the house, but the interest rate was just too high.
Yeah, it does. It does. It is a factor because especially when you look at what Skoda, Volkswagen Group, a lot of 0% floating around, especially in Skoda as well.
Yeah, I mean, Volkswagen Group in Ireland, anyway, is all we can really talk for. They are chasing market share like you wouldn't believe. And the good news for a customer is they just wanted you to buy one of their cars. So now's a great time to buy a car from them. But yeah, I think, if you don't need... It's not like the Qashqai is huge compared to the Renault 4. It is a little bit bigger. Look, if you fancy a change, if he wants a bit of strange...
Exactly what he wants. And look, life's too short to drive boring cars all the time. And the Renault 4 is not dull. And Renault, as we sit here in one, are knocking it out of the park at the moment on most of their range. They really are. They've been bold. They haven't over-egged the pudding when it comes to the design either. They're interesting. They look good, but they're not overly bloated and heavy, and certainly from watching your video on the Renault 4, it's a very appealing car, and it's one that, do you know what, it's nice to have a conversation about your car. It's nice to be standing next to it and someone comes up and goes, that's lovely.
That's a good way of looking at it. When you meet a mate for a coffee or a pint, whatever, Paul, and did you change the car in the end? What did you get? I went for another Qashqai. End of conversation. What did you get? Do you know what, I bought a Renault 4. What? Renault 4, like that old thing that used to be. Yeah, no, there's an EV version now. It is a car that's on trend at the moment.
But even with this, this is out a few weeks now. I'm not one of the first people in it. I'm a few weeks down the line, and I had a 10-minute conversation with a gentleman from Morocco here earlier on who stopped me and just said, look, can I see it? I remember these driving around my country when I was younger. The original Renault 5s, and he just was interested in it. And I've had people take pictures of the car. I've had teenagers take pictures of the car. I was in my own home train at Drogheda last night, and I had 14, 15-year-old boys, a really tough audience, who have no concept of what a Renault 5 is, taking pictures of it, and that's not going to happen with a Qashqai.
No. I don't know if it'll happen with a Renault 4. Maybe it will, but
I think it will. It's striking enough that it looks. It's not as dramatic as this car for sure, but in comparison to a Qashqai.
But that is very interesting, because I often say one of the few brands that teenagers will look at, boys, is a Cupra, and
you're right. Yeah.
The fact that they have no recollection of a car from the 70s, they're just judging this car on face value.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is
it's green.
This is St. Patrick's Day green.
That's the point. They're actually doing something that is making people like that making their head turn, and that doesn't happen. So, are you doing something like a huge proportion of cars is marketing, and if your car can really market itself being parked in the street, job done.
That is job done, exactly. If you do have more questions, we know a little bit about cars, so do send them in to driversrepublicpodcast@gmail.com. We're happy to answer your questions on both new and used car purchases. That's it for this week, Mark, I think.
That is it for this week, Paddy. But I'll tell you what, we have some very, very spicy guests over the next few weeks. Some interesting guests, people that are household names, people that like to rub some people up the wrong way. But maybe they're actually lovely in real life. Yeah.
So look, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And it is a bank holiday weekend. Please be safe on those roads, and talk to you next time.
And if you see Paddy in a bright green Kermit car, give him a wave.